That's good.
All right, you guys, we are going to get started so we can get you guys out of here within the hour and get you back to your classrooms. This is going to be the behavior management training. Okay, yes. We're going to, I'm sorry, I haven't had my coffee. All right, let's get started. When we are working with other people, there are two things that we need to be keeping in mind. The first one is motivation, and then the other one is relationships. So motivation, what are you motivated by when working with these individuals? What are your individuals motivated by? And in relationships, the kind of relationships that you have with your clients and your students, as well as the relationships that you guys have with each other, so your coworkers. Those are the two factors that you have to keep in mind when working here at ACCEL. Priorities. There's 3 priorities that we want to uphold as a company here at ACCEL. The first one is safety. The second one is televisibility, and then the third one is report. So for safety, basically you are not preparing the environment for problem behavior. You're rearranging the environment so that no problem behavior can occur, and you can ensure no harm. And then safety can include both physical safety and emotional safety. Does anybody know what televisibility is?
How it looks to other people.
Yeah.
How it appears, how what we're doing appears to people.
Mm-hmm. So basically, when you're working with these individuals here at ACCEL, you want to think about, okay, the way that I'm working with this individual, what if some stranger came and they were recording me and they showed it to the world? What will people think about me, how I'm interacting with this client? So you got to keep that in mind when working with our kiddos here. And then the third one is report. So you don't just build rapport by being nice to your students. You got to actually show empathy. You got to be enthusiastic. You got to build that relationship with them. How long do you guys think you guys should spend on building a rapport? What do you guys think? How long should it be?
Ongoing, never stops.
Yeah, it should be however long it takes for that client or that student to trust you and open up to you. So however long it takes, that's how long it's going to take. All right, we're going to go over some principles of behavior, and we tried not to use ABA terminology, make it as simple as we can. The first is the ABCs of behavior. Do you guys know what the ABCs stand for? Anybody on this side know what the ABCs stand for? Yes? What?
Antecedent behavior conflict.
That's right. So A is for antecedent, which is what happens before the behavior. B is behavior, which is what that student is doing. And then C is what happens immediately after the behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over some examples, practice identifying the antecedents. So the first one is Rob hits Susan after she takes the book that he was reading and she gives it back. So what would be the antecedent here? Don't look at your paper because the answers are there. You realize. What do you guys think the antecedent is for that first example? Rob hits Susan after she takes the book from him. Yeah, so basically Susan took the book. Well, what is the behavior?
Hitting.
Yeah. All right, Rick's mom is on the phone when he begins to scream. Then mom says what? What is the antecedent? Yeah, mom is using the phone. What is the behavior? The screaming. Awesome. Daniela throws her broccoli when dad puts it on her plate. Then Daniela eats her macaroni. So what is the antecedent here? Yep, the broccoli goes on the plate. That causes her to do what? Throw it. That's the behavior. Awesome. And then the last one is Tina grabs her backpack when mom says it's time for school. Mom responds, thank you. So what is the antecedent? Yep. So mom's saying time for school, and then what is the behavior? All right, now we're going to practice identifying the consequences. So what happens after the behavior? Rob hits Susan after she takes the book that he was reading and she gives it back to him. What is the consequence here? He gets it back. So what is he going to do next time? Yeah, he's going to hit her. Rick's mom says what when he begins to scream while she is on the phone? What is the consequence? Yep, he gets her attention. She says what? Daniela throws her broccoli when Dad puts it on her plate, so Dad gets more broccoli and puts it on her plate. What is the consequence? More broccoli. And the last one, Mom tells Tina, thanks for following directions, after Tina gets her backpack when asked. What is the consequence? She gets praise from Mom. Consequences are important because basically it's what are they getting, and if they're using a certain way of getting that consequence, is there another way, anything else that they can do to get that same result? We're going to talk a little bit about reinforcement. So there's two types of reinforcement. There's positive reinforcement and there is negative reinforcement. So positive reinforcement, you're adding something to increase that behavior. And then negative is you're removing something to increase that behavior. So remember, reinforcement, you're always increasing that target behavior. I can read the definition. Positive is the addition or positive of a stimulus after a behavior occurs that increases instances of that behavior in the future. And then negative is the removal of a stimulus after a behavior occurs that increases instances of the behavior in the future. Mo, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I got a question for you guys. When you hear the word reinforcement, like what do you understand? What is reinforcement? Like give me an example of reinforcement that you know. The reinforcement that you use every day in class. Like when you're working with students. Oh, I need to give them reinforcement. What kind of reinforcement do you guys use?
Time with the preferred staff.
Okay, yeah, which is the social reinforcement. What else reinforcement you guys use?
Praise or abuse.
Which is elbows. Okay, what other reinforcement? Huh?
I was going to say the same.
Something anybody else want to try anything? Because the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of people, when they hear the word reinforcement, they think it's always food, right? Reinforcement can be anything. That's why sometimes when you go in a classroom, you see somebody's teaching or somebody making somebody doing something, and then all they have is food because they're thinking, you know, this is the only thing that's working, right? Because food, anybody likes food, you know. But sometimes some kids, most of our students don't care about food. They care about patting on the back or whatever, right? They care if you touch their hands. They care if you give them high five, which is a social reinforcement, right? So it's very important to understand the reinforcement because that's going to help you to know what kind of reinforcement the students like, rather than just every time you're working with somebody, you have skills. Every time you work with somebody, you're eminent, think like because this is the only reinforcement I can use. But some of them, they don't care about it. They care about if you sit next to them, right? How many of you guys that work with the students and if you sit next to them, they like rather than you just give them some food. They don't care about food. They will take it because anybody can eat food, right? I mean, if they're not hungry, right? But so just try. The more you can understand the reinforcement, the better it is that, you know, for you to be able to work with the students without them getting in a challenging behavior, right? Anybody has a question when it comes to reinforcement? So the negative, you're removing, but so the reinforcement, the only time that you're using reinforcement if you want to increase the behavior that you want to see that happens every time, right? So you can either remove something to increase the behavior, or you can add something to increase the behavior. And just keep in mind, when people hear the word behavior, they're thinking behavior is about the behavior, and it is anything that dead man can do. Everything that you do right now, that's a behavior. So behavior will determine what you're doing, right? There can be a challenging behavior or it can be a positive behavior. So when you hear the word behavior, just keep in mind, it's not always behavior is about it, right?
All right, and then we have some very simple examples. Positive reinforcement, so you feel hot and thirsty. You ask, can I please have water? And then you receive water. So it's that addition of water that's going to increase your behavior of asking for water in the future when you're feeling thirsty. And then negative reinforcement, this is the one that everybody uses. You have a headache, so you take painkillers and then your headache is gone. So in the future, your behavior of taking a painkiller is going to increase whenever you have a headache. And then we're going to practice identifying positive versus negative reinforcement. So our first example is, Dion gets a 90% on her math test, so her parents don't make her do chores for a week. She keeps her math scores up. Is this positive or negative reinforcement? What do you guys think?
Negative.
Why?
Why is it negative?
Because they take away the chores.
Yeah, so it's the removal of the chores, and it's gonna have her continue to get that 90% on her math test. A child gets to leave the table when they eat all of their broccoli, so from now on, they always eat all of their broccoli. Positive or negative?
Negative.
Why do you guys think it's positive? Just guessing?
No, I said negative.
Just if you want to know, if the best way to understand the reinforcement, whether it's negative or positive, look at the behavior and the consequences. What do they get out of it, and what do they get? You know, so if you look over there, what is she getting?
They get to leave the table, so it's negative.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you get
So if you look at that, you'll be able to identify which one is negative, which one is positive reinforcement.
So they get to leave the table, so it's the removal of something, so it's negative. When Brittany fakes sick, she gets to stay home from work, so she continues to fake sick often. Is this positive or negative?
Negative.
Why?
Because she's faking to get what she wants. And
She doesn't want to work.
what she wants is to not go to school, but she needs to go to school.
What is being removed here? Yep, so work is being removed. She gets to stay home. She doesn't have to go to work, so it's negative. And then the last one is each time Greg answers a question right, the RBT gives him an M&M. He keeps answering correctly. Is this positive or negative reinforcement? Yep, that's positive reinforcement. All right, go ahead, Mo.
Okay, so I think I talked about this a couple minutes ago. So reinforcement. What's the goal of reinforcement? You're working with the student, right? Especially, for example, physical therapy. You're taking the student for a walk, right? You know that this student, every time I take this student for a walk, they tend to maybe sit on the ground or lay on the floor, whatever, because remember this behavior needs communication, they're communicating something, right? So the better we can teach the communication skills, the less engaging the problem behavior, right? So the only way you will know what kind of reinforcement to use with the specific student is the first thing that you need to know that you need to identify the reinforcement. How do you identify reinforcement? There's a different way to identify reinforcement. You can either sometimes you can ask if you're going to maybe room 5, you want to take a student for a walk. You can ask the teacher, like, hey, what are these students like, right? So you can take whatever that you want for the student to be able to engage whatever the behavior that you want them to engage. Example, to go for a walk. So, or you can do, we do preference assessment. Preference assessment is one of the ways that can identify whatever the students like or whatever the student doesn't like. You know, it's very important to identify reinforcement because that's going to help you to make the students do whatever that you want them to do, right? So you can either do a preference assessment, which is you can do formally or informally. Informally by asking the questions. You can do interviews with the teachers or with the staff, whatever the person that knows that students better, you can ask them the questions. Or you can do preference assessment. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much on the preference assessment because that's a whole another training that we're going to go through in the future. But those are just the ways that can help you to understand or identify reinforcement because it's very, like I said, it's very, very important to know that what the students like because that's the only way that they're going to be able to engage whatever that you want them to do. Rather than you're taking somebody for a walk and then just because you had somebody else 5 minutes ago they like Eminem, you think this person's gonna like Eminem. So let me just have to go ahead and have Eminem and then you understand why is not engaging whatever that you want to do. And then I keep giving him Eminem or I keep giving him high five and stuff. But some of them don't care about high five. They don't even want you to touch it, right? So those kind of stuff that identifying reinforcement is going to help you to be able to for the students to be able to stay, whatever that on-task behavior that you want them to do, right? So identify reinforcement is very, very important. And then another thing is schedule for reinforcement. So once you identify reinforcement, so schedule for reinforcement is going to help, like when you cannot use reinforcement, when you cannot not, right? So there's something that's called motivating operation. Motivating operation is reinforcement is a person has to want for it to be a reinforcement. If I don't want it, then it's not a reinforcement, right? How many of you guys like money when you're broke? Right? That's reinforcement. But if the more money you have, the less money you're going to want. Right? So it's the same thing as motivating operation. There's the AO or EO. AO is abolishing operation. EO is establishing operation. Abolishing operation is the more you give somebody. I usually, when I do training, I like to give examples, like vivid example. I give example myself, right? I don't like to eat the same thing every day. So the more, for example, if I had French fries for lunch, most likely I'm not going to have French fries for dinner. Because, so the more you have the same thing, the less you're going to want, right? So that's abolishing operation. So that works with our students too. You know, the more you do, for example, if you have somebody that's working for computer or iPad, whatever. So the longer they're going to have the iPad, the time that you want them to use it, right, for them to be compliant, they're most likely they're not going to care, right, because they have it all day. So it's the same thing so try to have the schedules of reinforcement for them, so you can use it the time that you really want it. The student came in from home, whatever, and then they're eating Skittles all day. And then it's time for morning meeting, you want the student to sit down so they can sit for morning meeting, and then now you're providing Skittles. If that student has been eating Skittles all day, I mean, the whole time that they came in the class, whatever, do you think Skittles is going to work? So the Skittles is not going to work, right? So by you providing Skittles, since the students walks in, that's abolishing operation. You just abolished the whole process of reinforcement. So try to use the schedule of reinforcement. That's going to help you in times that, for example, how many of you guys are doing physical therapy? Who's a physical? Anybody? So, for example, if you're going to take a student from whatever classroom for a walk, and you know that this student has a transition in this credit, and then the teacher, all the staff for that class will be feeding this student food all day. And then it's 1 o'clock. I need to take the student for a walk. You walk in that class and that student is full. You think you can use food for that student to walk? They're not going to walk, right? Because the whole time that student has been eating, and then now you're coming in with the box of chips. Oh, whatever, bag of chips. Like, oh, that's the whole thing. You want the chips? They're just going to be looking at you like, I just had, you know. So try to have a schedule for reinforcements. That's going to help you, because the most difficult time, that's the time that you're really going to use it, right? So the less you use it, the more likely they're going to need it. The more you use it, the less likely they're going to need it, right? So that's a very, very important understanding the schedule for reinforcement, which is motivating operation. Anybody have a question? Any scenario that you see in the classroom that maybe you want me to help you with the answers and stuff? No?
Just a quick question. AO stands for what?
Abolishing operation. EO stands for establishing operation. So the more you use it, you are abolishing it, because the more likely you're not going to need it. The less you use it as in a schedule, the more likely you're going to need it, because you're establishing the operation. Okay, so schedules of reinforcement. There is an interval. The student is engaging in the target behavior for a certain amount of time before receiving reinforcement. First and then board. How many of you guys in the classroom have seen the first and then you guys use it? Some of the stuff we don't even need to talk too much at the same time, because this is kind of like a refreshing, because you guys pretty much, there's nothing that I'm going to talk about it's going to be new, but you guys, it's going to be new. So you can use it first and then board, which is a structured reinforcement. Most of the stuff, most of our students, as you guys know, that they like visuals, right? So the more you can show them something, is more structured, they can most likely remember. Rather than say, okay, first we need to do this, then you can get an iPad. Some of them, they probably don't even know what the heck is an iPad, right? Oh, first we need to do this, then you can go for a walk. Oh, you can get maybe a cup of juice. Some of them, they probably don't have, because they go by muscle memory more than anything. So the more, if you have a first and then board, that you can have a picture, I think I have it. I don't have to show it because you guys have seen it already. So you're working with a certain student. This is very good to use because they can actually see. And then another time too, you can use this one for them to think, like, okay, what are you working for, right? If you think I'm working for a drink, okay, you're working for a drink, okay. Then first work, and then you can get a drink. Because if they see a picture of drink, they're more likely going to remember rather than you just telling them it's like you just talking to someone like, okay, the first thing you need to do is this, then you can get a juice. Like they don't even remember what type of juice is. But if you show them, next time if you tell them, like I say, they go by muscle memory, next time you say they're more likely to remember more, rather than you just give them information and stuff.
One thing that you guys should keep in mind is that your students should always have those options to pick from. So maybe like a choice menu of visuals. Okay, you can work with this, anything that they like. And then always keep in mind that if you know that this student really, really likes something more than all the other things that are on the list, save that for when they're having the most difficult time. So there can be days where they come in and they can be having a really bad day, so save those reinforcers for times like that rather than, giving it to them whenever they want it. All right, and we're gonna talk about some antecedent strategies. So what are antecedent strategies? These are basically the events that occur, or antecedents, as we know, are the events that occur immediately before a behavior. And then our focus here is problem behavior. So the antecedent strategies are what we do to prevent that problem behavior. There are some strategies that you can use to be proactive in preventing problem behavior, and the first one is going to be pairing. Pairing is the process of establishing yourself as a preferred or reinforcing stimulus. So if you walk into a classroom to work with your student and they see you, they should feel, oh, I'm going to get something I really like because this person is here. There's 3 things that you got to do before you can pair. It's you cannot place any demands. When you're pairing yourself with a student, especially if it's your first time working with that student, do not place any demands. Follow the student's lead. So if they're going to walk over there and play in the corner, just follow their lead, walk with them, play with whatever that they're playing with, and then provide maximum reinforcement. So if it's a young kiddo, that's very easy. They're probably playing with toys. You can get on the floor and play with the toys. And if it's someone older, maybe they like talking about something. So if you're pairing yourself, talk about what they like to do and then provide as much reinforcement as you can. And that is how you can pair yourself as a reinforcer. Why should you pair? Well, when you become a reinforcer or a deliverer of good things, they're going to want to listen to you. Nobody's going to want to listen to me if I go and I'm only delivering bad news or, not giving them what they want. But if I'm reinforcing them, they're going to want to listen to me. They're going to want to take instruction from me. An example can be your best friend asks for a favor versus a high school bully asking for a favor. Who are you going to do the favor for? The bully or your best friend?
Best friend.
Yeah, you would do it for your best friend because you have paired with your best friend. Another example can be you got to think about pairing after a problem behavior occurs. So let's say if your significant other is asking for a favor following a romantic date versus following a huge fight. So which one would you rather do? You would rather listen to them after they make a favor after a romantic date, but not after the fight. Pairing dues, you should follow the child's lead, ask what they want to play with if it's applicable, allow activities to naturally end if it is necessary to move on. So if they're doing something, don't abruptly end the activity, kind of let things come to a natural end. Try to deliver the reinforcement as much as possible and be patient because it will take time. Some don'ts, don't place demands even if you're playing, and then don't ask questions other than to assess preferences. So you can ask questions like, oh, okay, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? What do you want to play with? You can ask questions like that, but don't be like, oh, which one do you want to do? This blue one or red one? Just don't ask any questions and don't require any answers. So if you do ask something and they decide to ignore you, that's fine. Don't interrupt or end activities and don't force yourself to play with them. Our next strategy is EID, which is effective instructional delivery. These are important steps that increase the likelihood that an instruction will be followed correctly. So there's 6 components to this. Our first component is to present instructions as directives. So for example, show me red instead of can you show me red. with a neutral tone of voice. So what would be the problem if I said, can you show me red? Why shouldn't I use stuff like that?
Say no.
They can say no, and then you're gonna have to listen to them, right? They have that choice. You gave them the choice, and they can say no. Number 2, present instructions within 3 feet of learner and on their level. So if my student was standing across the classroom and I wanted him to clean up his desk, I can't scream from over here and say, hey, I need you to clean up your desk. I gotta go stand within 3 feet of him, make sure he's paying attention to me, and then deliver that instruction. Use specific but concise language. So you can say, clean up and walk to your backpack instead of saying, oh, it's time to get going because it's the end of the day and we need the classroom clean. You're basically adding more words that can confuse them. So instead, just be very specific and be very clear. Use start commands rather than stop commands. So walking feet, please, rather than stop running. What is another example of start and stop commands that you should be using in the classrooms?
Quiet voice.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking. I hear that so much. Be quiet. We don't talk like this. Like, I've heard that so much. So you got to use those start commands rather than stop commands, because having that negative tone of voice can actually set the students off. Ensure learner disengages from task prior to instruction. So if I was sitting here and I'm typing and you're telling me something, I might not be paying attention to you. So you gotta wait until I stop typing and I have your attention, and then you can deliver the instruction. And that goes with number 6, ensure that you have gained attention or established motivation when appropriate. So you can ask questions like, what are you working for? Or you can even remind them, hey, are you still working for iPad? Are you still working for this break? So just remind them what they're working for. Okay. We're gonna practice changing a sentence or a demand. So for this one, instead of saying, can I have the Lego, what can we say instead? Yeah, Lego please, or give me the Lego.
What?
Are you a speech therapy?
Okay.
Okay. Who's a speech therapy?
Instead of saying from the teacher's desk, it doesn't look like you're reading your book, what can you do instead? What do you guys think? What is a better way of doing this? Right, and then how would you do it? Would you do it from your desk, or would you go up to the student? Yeah, so you, instead of doing it from your desk, you would go up to the student and say, either remind them to read their book. There's no shouting in class. What is a better way of saying this?
Quiet voice.
Quiet voice, please. Do you want to come up and write your answers on the board? How would you, what is a better way of saying this? Yeah, if you want them to do it, then don't give them the option to say no. I am going to need you to do your work so we can finish math, and then we'll get to go to lunch and recess. What is a more simpler way of saying this? Because this is a lot of words and a lot of instructions.
Lunch and recess.
Yeah, see, that's very simple. Can you do the next one?
Do the next one.
Yeah. Hey, stop running.
Walking feet.
Don't do that. I don't like it. No, thank you.
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I asked you who's a speech therapist here, because the only time that you can ask a question to our students is if you're teaching communication skills, right? Which you guys have done a couple of times, right? You're teaching somebody how to say yes or no. So if you're teaching somebody how to say yes or no, you're more likely going to say the question, right? Hey, do you want to eat right now? Or do you want to take a break, right? So because you want them to say yes or no to be able to answer that. So that's the only time that you can use the questions if you're teaching, if you're speech therapy, or you're doing any type of speech that you want them to communicate with you, to be able to say yes or no. That's the only time that you use questions. But if you're providing any type of demand that you know that you're going to follow through, or you have your expectations that you want a student to do something, for example, it's time to go outside. It's time to go back to the classroom, right? It's time for morning meeting. It's time to put your stuff away. It's time to wash your hands. It's time for hygiene. You see how I can do this easy, right? I mean, I do it every day, that's why. But okay, so it's kind of like a muscle memory. You remember, if you want them to do something, you're more likely not going to ask them because the last thing you want to do is, hey, who's ready for work? 95% of the time, 95% of the time they're going to say no, right? Right? So if you know that, you're more, just be more proactive about it. Like if you want them to do something, you have your expectation, it's time for something. I usually like to use it's time for, because it's more like a statement rather than a question. Hey, it's time to go outside. It's time to line up. It's time to put the books away. It's time to wash your hands. It's time for hygiene. So it's like you're telling them to do something rather than, who ready for hygiene? Nobody's probably going to answer that question, right? So try to avoid questions, and if you have expectations that you want them to do something schedule-wise, rather than, unless if you're teaching as a speech therapy, if you're teaching them something for communication skills, you want them to say yes or no, then now you can ask the questions.
Okay, our next strategy is the first then principle. So that's basically that visual that we have right there. You can use that as antecedent strategies. So basically with that, a less preferred activity usually goes in the first, and then something more preferred goes in the then. There's another name for it. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, but the first then principle is also called something else. Do you guys know? It's called the grandma's law. When your grandma says first do this, then you can have that. So it's actually called grandma's law. And basically they need to do something in order to earn something more preferred. You guys have probably seen that used in classrooms a lot. We do use that a lot here. Language matters. So instead of using if language, you can use when language. Because when you use if language, you're basically bribing the student, and we don't want to bribe them. When you use a when language, that is a reminder. For example, let's say that you're at the grocery store with your toddler, and then your toddler starts screaming, "Oh, I want the lollipop." And you say, "If you be quiet, I can get you a lollipop." You're basically bribing them to be quiet. But when you say, "Hey, when you have a quiet voice, you can tell me what you want," and then you're basically reminding them of their expectation of keeping that quiet voice. Priming. This is a warning that is given to the learner to prepare them for a transition or a change in activities. This is something very simple, but a lot of us just forget to do it. You're basically giving them, you can do this with timers. Hey, in 5 minutes we're going to be doing this, or you have 2 minutes left and then we're going to go outside, or you have 2 minutes left and we're going to go inside. Basically getting them ready for whatever you guys are about to do next. And this is actually very similar to the first then principle as well. Scheduled access to preferred items, activities, or people. So that is where those schedules of reinforcement can come in. You're basically providing a desired item or activity on a regular... Oh wait, no, this is something else. I have an example here. It says that if a child were to engage in problem behavior due to a lack of attention, we may provide attention every so often to prevent that child from engaging in problem behavior. So basically it would be regardless of what they're doing, you're still providing that reinforcement. And that is scheduled access. Okay.
Can you go back to that for a second?
Yeah. You have a question?
This is what I'm having trouble with.
Okay.
I just want to read it again.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So for this, it can be like the first example, giving Jimmy a high five every 30 minutes, and it can be regardless of what he's doing. So even if he's engaging in something that you don't want him to do, you would still give him that access. So that's basically providing that scheduled access. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then there's some examples here. So Kim loves to play with her fidget spinner. To help keep Kim on track in class, every 5 minutes she gets to play with her fidget spinner for 1 minute. So it doesn't matter what she's doing, every 5 minutes she's gonna get that fidget spinner. She gets to play with it for 1 minute. 1 minute's done, timer gets reset to 5 minutes, and it just keeps going like that. Jamie will often burst out random animal sounds when it is time for individual classwork. Jamie's parent noticed that Jamie tends to burst out animal sounds more when he is not paying attention to Jamie. So the parent sets a 30-second timer to praise Jamie for completing his classwork. Now he's making less loud noises and animal noises. So basically every 30 seconds, when the timer goes off, you provide that attention. You keep doing it every 30 seconds, no matter what. Even if it's like, oh, he's making so many noises, I don't want to give him attention, but as soon as that 30 seconds is up, you give him that attention. Visual schedules are also antecedent strategies. So you can have however your morning is going to go. You can have the first, next, then. These are just basically examples of what kind of visual schedules that you can use. A lot of the classrooms have visual schedules like this, and then some have these that are just written on the board. So we use all kinds of visual schedules here. And this is just for helping the students so they know what to expect next, whatever activity that they're doing for that day. Don't have time. We're gonna go over some consequence strategies. Our first consequence strategy is differential reinforcement. Do you guys know what differential reinforcement is? Does anybody know what differential reinforcement is? So basically you're manipulating the quality of the reinforcer. So this can be your praise. Let's say that I want to praise you for doing your work. If you do it independently, I can be like, yay, you did it. But if you needed some help, I can be like, oh, okay, nice job. So basically you're kind of controlling how you would provide that reinforcement. If they do it the way you want them to do it, they do it completely independently, you give them as much reinforcement as you want, and then if they do it with some help, then you can dial down that reinforcement. So you're basically differentiating.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just to add something when it comes to differential reinforcement is the first thing that you want to do when you're doing differential reinforcement is know the reinforcement that you're going to provide, right? The first thing, know the reinforcement that you're going to provide and then understand the target behavior that you're going to reinforce. You see the difference there? So for example, I'm teaching the students how to wash their hands, right? So hand washing is a behavior that I'm going to reinforce, right? And then knowing that what reinforcement am I going to use for that specific behavior that I want to see it increase, right? So for example, I'm working with somebody that likes skills, right? So my reinforcement is the skills, right? And then my target behavior is what? Hand washing, because that's what I want to see it increase. So every time the student is going to wash their hands, I'm going to provide the skills. You see that? So that's how you use the differential reinforcement. So know the reinforcement that you are going to use and know the targeted behavior that you want to see increase.
All right, our next consequence strategy is shaping. So you're basically providing rewards for achieving steps closer to the end goal. You got to think about what your end goal is, and then you break that down into smaller steps, and they do one at a time until finally they can do that last step independently. An example can be responding to the name. So the first step can be that the learner turns their head towards the speaker. The next step can be they turn their whole face to the speaker. And then the last step can be that they also make eye contact with the speaker. So basically you're breaking things down into smaller steps in order to achieve that one big final step. Token economy, which is a system in which tokens which have no value independently are delivered for engaging in target behaviors, and then they're basically exchanged for a backup reward. So we don't have an example, but you guys have probably seen it in the classrooms where they're earning stars. It's like a board like this, and maybe there is like 5 stars. There it is, yeah. That's what it is. That's a token economy. They earn stars, and then they know what they're working for. So when they earn all those 5 stars, they get whatever it is that they picked for I am working for. Those are token economies. Oh, there it is. Looks like this. There are some components to the token economy. The first one is that you should select about 1 to 3 behaviors to earn tokens. So it can be an independent response, it can be sitting at their seat, it can be, if you're trying to teach them how to write, it can be them holding their pencil right. Identify terminal reward, so that is where that menu of choices will come in. They have to be the ones that pick what it is that they're working for. design initial schedule. So you got to decide, okay, what kind of work do they have to do for each token that they earn? So it can be 1 response equals 1 token. It can be 2 responses equals 1 token. It can be 10 minutes of staying in your seat equals 1 token. Stuff like that. So you got to decide what the criteria is for them to earn those tokens. And then fade tokens systematically. So you can start out with 1 token for every 3 responses, and then you can change it to 1 token for every 10 responses, because eventually this system has to be faded out. It's not something that we can just continue using. You can get it started so your student can engage in that behavior that you want them to, but eventually it has to be faded out.
Especially if you're using food as a reinforcement.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go to grocery shopping every weekend, right? I mean, unless if you got that money, but if you're using food, you want to be very, very careful when it comes to using reinforcement. Because the food can be gone rather than iPad. The iPad is just there. So this one you want to decrease your enforcement response whatever as much as possible, so it can be independent.
And if you are going to be using the token economy, just remember to stay consistent. So you can't just be like, oh, okay. Because I have seen this where there's some students and they kind of change up the times based on how the student is having like her day. If she's having a good day, then they make her do work every like 30 minutes and she earns a token, versus if she's having a bad day, they switch it to like every 10 minutes you get a token. So for that can be confusing for her, because she probably doesn't understand, oh, I'm having a bad day, that's why they're decreasing it. So you got to keep it consistent no matter what, and then gradually increase that time or decrease it. Just some additional notes before we end this. Extinction. Do you guys know what extinction is? Have you guys ever heard of that term, the term extinction? You want to tell us about it?
Disappeared. Disappeared. I
You're-
don't know what the term means.
Yeah, you're basically withholding a reinforcer for a behavior that was previously reinforced, and it results in a decrease in the behavior in the future. So an example here is prior to extinction, whenever a boy yelled, his mom came into the room. So mom implemented extinction by no longer coming into the room. Now that yelling no longer gets mom to come into the room, the boy has stopped yelling. Basically, if you know that they were reinforced by something, you stop doing that, and then eventually they'll decrease that behavior. Does anybody have any examples that they want to provide, maybe, that they've used of extinction?
What kind of extinction procedure do you do? That you're seeing something. Remember the ABC? What happened before the behavior, the consequences, right? All those 3 things that we talked about at the beginning, there's a functional relationship to it. When you do behavior analysis, when you want to know the function of a problem behavior, ABC, you would always go back to the ABC. Every time. That's why the ABC is very, very important. Knowing your ABC is going to help you identify the function of the problem behavior. You identifying the function of a problem behavior is going to help you knowing the extinction procedures for that function. You're not going to the hospital with headache and you get some medication for stomachache, right? That's not going to cure your headache. If you go to the hospital for headache, you're going to get pills for headache, not for stomachache. So it's the same thing as knowing the function is the only way that's going to help you understanding what kind of extinction procedures that I'm going to do for this person. The function is access to attention. More likely the extinction procedures is going to do remove the attention where the problem behavior is happening, right? Remove the attention from the individual. Extinction procedures for escape maintain. There is a procedures for that. The last thing you want to do is the student is engaging in problem behavior or challenging behavior for access to attention, you're doing extinction procedures for escape maintain. And then you're asking yourself like, every time I do this, it's not working. It's not working. Because the function, you're doing extinction procedures wrong, right? So extinction procedures for access maintained, you do extinction procedures for access to attention, which is taking attention away from. But keep in mind, a lot of people, especially a lot of teachers, they always ask me this kind of question, that every time when you do extinction procedure, there's something called extinction burst. Extinction burst is, the behavior will always get worse before it gets better, because you are changing something. If you give me $100 every day, and then all of a sudden, you're not giving me $100 anymore, I'm going to have a problem behavior, right? Because I'm used to it. Like, how come I'm not getting it today? So I'm going to do something, to show my emotional response. Because I'm just not getting it. And you have to understand and remember this. We are dealing with individuals that don't have their communication skills that isn't the same level as us. So they think for them engaging in a problem behavior, first is more effective. And then most of the time we tend to pay attention to negative behavior rather than to positive behavior. So the lower their communication skills, the more they can engage in problem behavior. The higher their communication skills is, the less likely engaging in problem behavior. So knowing the function of a problem behavior is very, very important because that's the only way that you will do extension procedures for that process. So again, most of the time, if not all the time, behavior will get worse first before it gets better. That's why a lot of people try to stop there. Because every time I take the iPad away from the student during the morning meeting, they hit me. The behavior gets worse. Therefore, I'm not going to take it away. Right? That's a behavior problem. Because you giving the iPad back, you are stopping the behavior. But you are not teaching anything. You literally told that person that next time if you want me to give you the iPad back, just hit me. Or just go ahead and cry. But there's a way that you can do that. That's why I'm introducing function communication training. So you guys are speech therapists, can teach somebody to ask for something rather than engaging in a problem behavior, right? So the more they can ask for it, the less they will get in a problem behavior, rather than them just hit me and then give the iPad back.
All right, Mo just went over all of this. All right, and then our last slide is replacement behaviors. So basically, you gotta come up with, okay, I don't want the student to be engaging in this problem. What would I rather have them doing instead? So those are your replacement behaviors. You have to identify a replacement behavior before you decide that you want to decrease a certain behavior. So if you want them to stop speaking out of turn, you got to identify, okay, I want them to raise their hand first. So you got to teach them that. That is where extinction will come in. They speak out of turn, you got to ignore that. But when they raise their hand, then you can praise them so they know, okay, every time I raise my hand, I get the attention or they call on me. But if I'm speaking out of turn or I'm talking without raising my hand and nobody's listening to my answers. Functional communication training, FCT, it's actually one of the most powerful tools for replacing maladaptive behaviors. So you're basically teaching them how they can properly ask for whatever it is. So it can be a break. You're teaching them how to ask for a break. You're teaching them how to ask for something that they want, basically. But they're using that functional communication training. And if they're using it, you need to be reinforcing it. So let's say that you sit down, you're about to work with your student, and then all of a sudden they ask for a break, but they're using their words. You need to be reinforcing that rather than saying, oh no, we have to do the work, we got to do it now. You got to reinforce them using their communication by asking for that break. And then once they take their break, they can come back to doing their work. So remember, with functional communication training, always reinforce them asking things the proper way. You want to add something before we finish?
Yeah, just the only reason that it gets a little bit tricky what you just talked about, which is I've had a lot of people asking that kind of question, teachers in the class, and they said, oh, so if my student, as soon as I start working with the student and then they're asking for a break, why should I give them the break if I want them to work, right? Because it's like I'm letting them avoid it or escaping from work, right? But keep in mind one thing is, if they're asking for something, and then that can turn their maladaptive behavior often, that means that's a reinforcement, right? Next time, then you can use this. Remember last time you wanted a break? Okay, now let's do something. Then you can take a break. You can use structural reinforcement as your tool, because remember that last time that you gave them a break, it works. Okay, so now you know that this person likes to take a break. Okay, so you want to take a break right now? How about we do, so especially if you're dealing with somebody with escape maintained, what you want to do is there's something that's called behavior momentum. Behavior momentum is you always want to start with something very simple to gain your momentum, rather than if for somebody that don't like doing math, you don't want to start with something big number, because they're going to do something to avoid whatever you want them to do. So start with something simple, like, okay, you want to take a break? How about maybe let's just do this one, and then you can take a break, right? So that's how you gain the behavioral momentum, rather than starting with something very, very difficult, and then you know that they're probably not going to do it. You know, so if you know that break is what they're looking for, remember the first couple minutes I said that reinforcement is only reinforcement if a person wants it. If I don't want it, it's not a reinforcement. So for me for reinforcement to be known as a reinforcement, a person has to want it. So if they're asking for a break, that means they want it. So you can use it as a reinforcement to first and then. Okay, you want to take a break? Let's do this, especially if you're working with somebody that's function a little bit high function, that they're understanding what you're saying. And if you remember when she talked about the EID, which is effective instruction delivery, when you deliver your instruction, make sure they understand what you're saying. You want to take a break? Okay, let's go ahead, maybe put your shoes on, or something simple that you know that they are going to engage independently. Then that's a behavioral momentum. Then you can go to the next level, all right?
All right, you guys have any questions, comments, anything you guys are confused about? Cool.
Anything good? All right, thank you guys. Thank you for showing up. You can keep that if you want it, or if you don't want it, that's totally fine, that you can leave it on the desk, but we really appreciate you guys.